I found a pair of haunted boots from the deep web, and they led me to a madness I never expected. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just any door. It was that rusty old cellar door in my basement. The whispers from below had been calling me. They clawed at my mind, pulling me closer to the unknown. I stood there, heart racing, breath quickening. What was I thinking? My normal routine had been shattered. I had stuffed my days with work, the dull hum of my office, the glow of my computer screen. I thought I kept my life mundane, safe. But then came the late-night scroll through the deep web. The thrill of the forbidden had seduced me. That's when I found the boots. They looked ordinary at first, black leather, scuffed-up soles. But there was something off about them. An energy radiated from the screen, a creeping sensation that coiled around my stomach. The seller claimed they were possessed, infused with the souls of their previous owners. I thought it was a joke. But there was a desperate need to know more. I bought them. That's when the madness started. The moment I tried them on, shadows danced at the edges of my vision. The air turned frigid. A foul smell wafted from nowhere, like old decay lingering. I took a step, and a sharp pain shot through my ankle. I stumbled, feeling a cold grip around my throat. The world felt different then. The colors darkened, and the shadows grew long and menacing. I could hear the flickers of laughter, disembodied giggles that echoed in my mind, pulling at threads of sanity. I turned around, expecting to see someone, yet the room was empty. Then came the noiseless creaks in the floorboards, whispers that seemed to swirl around me, mocking me. My heart hammered louder and louder, each beat threatening to burst from my chest. I squinted into the dimness. A figure appeared in the corner, slipping between the shadows, almost blending into the darkness. Just a trick of the light, I thought. But the uncertainty gnawed at me. Am not alone. I can't be alone. Then I heard a sound of boots shuffling, just like mine. I froze. The room felt smaller, walls closing in. With each breath, the air thickened, suffocating me. I grasped the desk for support, my fingers trembling. I wanted to scream, to run, but something held me there, like I was rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting erratic shadows that writhed and twisted. The whispers turned into full-fledged wails, filling my ears with their chaos. The figure was closer now, its shape sharp, almost human, but wrong in every way. And then, that horrific moment came, a loud crash as something slammed against the door behind me. I whipped around, heart racing, panic setting in, when I caught a glimpse of the boots moving toward me. I didn't want to look, but I had to. What was there? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure lunged as I turned, and my body recoiled instinctively, my heart hammering like a war drum. My eyes widened as I recognized the glint of familiar black leather, the haunted boots. They weren't just cursed footwear. They were alive, slashing through the air like an arachnid. The air quivered, vibrating with a monstrous energy that thrummed beneath the floorboards. I stumbled backwards, my legs failing to cooperate as the grip of fear tightened around me. The shadows writhed, pouring from the walls, as if the darkness itself had come alive. Eyes flickered out of the void, yellow, pinprick eyes that stared, unblinking in Hungary. "Help me," a raspy voice croaked from the recesses of the cellar. It crawled beneath my skin, slinking through my veins and wrapping around my mind. They want me to stay here, take my place. A sudden surge of recognition flickered in my mind. I had read about those who wore the boots before, met those who vanished without a trace. I was now standing at the precipice of their anguish, and I realized with a jolt, this might not just be a twisted joke. This might be my inevitable fate. The figure stepped out from the shadows, revealing a pale face with sunken eyes, and lips stretched into a rictus grin. It was a reflection me own. The horror sank deep as I saw the same boots I wore transform into something grotesque, roots twisting from the soles, burrowing into the ground like bloated worms. They were feeding on me, siphoning away my essence, drawing me closer to that abyss below. Join us. The echo of my own voice morphed, the tone darkening as the figure spoke. You belong to the boots now. Before I could scream, the cellar door behind me splintered. Light poured through the jagged cracks, battling against the encroaching darkness. The room spun precariously, and I felt gravity shift. The ground seemed to tease my footing, drawing me toward the gaping maw of the cellar until I fought against it, desperate for escape. I couldn't let it take me. But then, I heard something else, a drumming sound, irregular yet hypnotic. It resonated from beyond the splintered door, steady but growing louder, melding with the cries of those ensnared by the boots. The floorboards creaked ominously, as if alive with tension, and I realized with dread that whatever was coming through that door meant to claim me as well. Moments stretched and compressed. Time seemed to slow. I felt tethered to the boots, an invisible line pulled taut between their darkness and my soul. The whims of fate wrestled through the air. The drumming intensified, morphing into a ghastly chant that echoed through the corridors of my mind. Shadows shrieked, reached for me, as the door buckled under the pressure of whatever had been summoned beneath. And then, in that heart-stopping moment, the door burst open, and a figure lunged through the threshold, draped in the very garments of despair. "Run!" it screamed, voice piercing through the madness-filled air, weighty with urgency. It was another soul lost to the chaos, eyes wild, drenched in desperation. Don't let them. But before I could react, the shadows converged. They swept over the warning figure, engulfing him in a cacophony of screams and laughter. I stood entranced, fear melding with terror as the boots at my feet cried out with insatiable hunger for more. All I could do was watch as the figure writhed in an embrace of agonizing shadows, the drumming now mingling with my own heartbeat, a necrotic rhythm that promised only annihilation. The last thing I saw was a tortured face dissolving into the dark, and then nothing. I turned, adrenaline surging, a primal instinct burning through me as I prepared to flee, but the boots tightened their grip. My feet felt heavy, ensnared as the whispers flared into a crescendo, filling the entire room until my very thoughts blared with their agony. And just as I felt myself being pulled down into the depths of despair, I heard it again. The drumming. But this time, clearer. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside my mind. The fate of those before me surged within me, clawing at the edges of my consciousness. My reflection grinned wider, the figure shrieked its final cry, and I was no longer sure where I ended, and the madness began. A final whisper clawed its way into my ear. "You will wear the boots now." I screamed, the sound swallowed by the overwhelming darkness, pouring into me like a flood. Then silence. The void held me in its suffocating embrace, a tranquil death before the storm. I felt the slick warmth of blood that dripped from the soles of my enchanted boots. Had I been responsible for that death, or was it merely the thrall of their dark call? The silence around me was all-consuming, wrapping tighter than a shroud. Yet, in that stillness, the darkness whispered. "Step deeper." It beckoned, honeyed words slithering around me like a serpent. I clenched my fists, heart thrumming with an energy I couldn't label. Was it fear, power, or something far more sinister? Echoes of anguish pulsed through my veins, the sensations mixing with my own sobs, changing me with every heartbeat. The boots craved movement. They surged with energy, as if alive, demanding surrender. But beneath the beastly lure of those cursed creations, a thin sliver of clarity sparked. I could still feel the remnants of the soul that had died in front of me, clawing from within, an unsung elegy begging for release. Instinctively, I began moving backward, only to find those unyielding roots had anchored themselves deeper into the ground. With every jerk, my soul experienced a jolt, as if snapping from a dream to a nightmarish reality. "Come!" the voice hummed, a chorus of long-lost souls woven into a single tone, invading my thoughts. "Let us not flee, but embrace what is to come." Panic sifted through my mind, conjuring images of those I cared for, people whose faces reminded me of warmth, of life. And yet, all I felt was an insatiable pull. The curtains of reality parted enough for an alien void to seep in. I remained, teetering on the edge of choice and damnation. The cellar, dimly lit by faint glimmers of movement, figures that flickered out of existence as soon as they caught sight of me, as a desolate world made of damp walls and memories that twisted like barbed wire. The primal urge to flee clashed violently with the intoxicating power emanating from the boots. Perhaps I could harness their curse. Perhaps I could wield them against what lurked in these shadows, against those who had come before me. But who was I kidding? I had barely survived the night's horrors. There was no strength left in me, and the boots betrayed that delusion with a sharp, agonizing thrall. Suddenly, the ground beneath me vibrated, and in that moment of despair, I envisioned the faces of my ancestors. Their discomfiting stare carried decades of suffering, stories tangled with self-worth and regret. My decision was clear. I twisted on my heel, fighting against my own limbs, the boots now howling in protest. Tendrils of darkness lashed at my legs with chilling desperation. I could hear them weeping, wailing, begging me to succumb. I needed to get to the cellar door, but just as I turned, the shadows began to dance. They coalesced in the corners, forming jagged figures hovering just outside my periphery, whispers morphing into haunting laughter. Fear gripped me as the sensation of eyes watching me deepened. The figures solidified into grotesque forms that flickered in and out of reality, distorting everything in their wake. Their faces were vague reflections of people I might know, friends, strangers, even fleeting glances from the streets of my memory, now twisted into expressions of horror. Each visage snarled and twitched with malevolence, and as I gasped for breath, the laughter grew deafening, merging with the drumming that pulsed through the air, laden with menace. "Join us," they murmured in ragged unison, words stained with the echoes of 100 lost souls pleading with me to bow to the inevitable. As I stumbled backward, I could feel them pushing against the very fabric of my existence. I pressed my hand against the wall, trying to ground my sense of self, but the void warped whatever remained of my reality. Then I realized this was not just a cavern. It was a nexus of unfathomable rage and sorrow, a place where nightmares converged. I was not still. I was evaporating, dissipating into the atmosphere they festooned with desperation. A paralyzing clarity seized me as I approached the door. I was not merely fighting against the ghosts that haunted this place. I was the vessel through which they passed. The boots began to jab and pull at me, as if sensing my resolve and preparing to drag me back down into their eternal dance. But the door wasn't just an exit, it was a barrier. With a sound like shattering glass, it swung wide, revealing a kaleidoscope of writhing shadows, swirling like a storm ready to devour. Beyond it, a fleeting glimpse of daylight illuminated the end of an uncharted path, where freedom existed but felt forever unattainable. In that splitting instant, a wraith lunged forward, its skeletal arms reaching out to me with a terrifying hunger. "You must stay," it screeched, voice like a thunderclap, resonance shattering the illusion of security. But my heart screamed out defiance. I threw myself toward the door. But then, just as I converged on that threshold, a chilling laugh enveloped me. A familiar face emerged from the confusion, a twisted version of myself, eyes glimmering with darkness and promise, whispering, You can't escape us, you're one of us now, join the dance. And before I could scream, the wraith's icy fingers swept through, wrapping around my throat, cutting off the last vestiges of my courage. The world around me warped, and as the shadows curled like serpents, the boots pressed firmly against my flesh, dragging me back into the abyss, the laughter resonating all around, mocking my very existence. The darkness unfurled its maw, and I plunged into its depths, screaming as the final echoes of my own twisted self swallowed me whole. "Welcome to the dance," it whispered as the void surrounded me, and the drumming crescendoed into a deafening silence. Even in the silence of the void, the laughter echoed, dripping like poison into the recesses of my mind. I felt suspended, a marionette with strings cut, falling into nothing. My senses dulled as darkness enveloped me, compressing like a cave infiltrated by the breath of a hidden beast. Waves of despair washed over me, each caress a reminder of my failing spirit. The screams of those I once knew faded to whispers, coated with the acrid memories of terror and regret, as shadows darted like edges of blades against my consciousness. The wraith's grip on my throat slackened, and instead of falling into the abyss, I found myself crumpled and gasping on the cold stone floor. My heart raced, pounding a morbid symphony against the insistent thrumming of the boots, still cruelly affixed to my feet. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and something infinitely more sinister decay. I floundered, wrestling against the shadows that coiled unforgivingly around my limbs. It was then that I recognized the dreadful truth. I was still in the cellar, yet it transformed before my eyes. The damp walls seeped, dripping with a gooey darkness, stinging my eyes with its acrid odor. Glimmers of ghostly figures surged forward, undulating with a voracious hunger. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperate to shield myself from their piercing stares, each one filled with desperation, the silent echoes of my past clawing at the edges of my brittle conscience. "Let us return," a voice slithered from the darkness, weaving through the air with intricately threaded malice. "Embrace your truth." In a moment of sheer clarity, I felt that those I had lost, tethered to me like echoes in a hollow chamber. Their faces morphed, twisting as if through a funhouse mirror, revealing loss and grief, sorrow and torment. My skin prickled, each ripple of emotion amplifying a tidal wave of despair that threatened to pull me under. What had I done? My fragile mind teetered on the brink of insanity. The realization that these boots harbored remnants of their anguish threatened to consume me whole. I was rooted in their fate, bound to relive their torment until I saw my own reflection in the decaying shadows. Had they danced like them? Had they shouted like me? "Join us." The chant surged, a cacophony of rhythmic despair bottled into an ethereal cry. The once distant figures drew closer, coalescing into a mass of shimmering flesh, the air thickening with their presence. Faces I recognized but couldn't fully grasp glimmered in that swirling mass, faded memories writhing and coiling, forging new horrors to serve their insatiable hunger. Suddenly, the boots groaned, the leather tightening around my ankles as if sensing my wavering resolve. I felt their energy pulsing, attuning to the nightmares that encircled me. They awaited my surrender, promising communion with the lost, an embrace drenched in despair. "Refuse us and feel the pain of all who walk these halls before you," a voice coaxed, soft yet undeniably sinister, spoken from lips I once knew. "We are family. Let us bind our fates." I fought against it, heart racing, yet my breath hitched at the juxtaposition. The grotesque beauty of surrender loomed enticingly before me. Perhaps there was power in this suffering. They wanted me to weave their stories into my own. Wasn't that what I craved in this abyss? With desperation clawing at my heart, I struggled to rise, but the more I resisted, the tighter the shadows gripped me, binding the intangible fear. My past flickered before my eyes, friends I had betrayed, family torn apart by tragedy, and all I wished was to fix what had been broken. But within their longing lay only more anguish, an inferno of shattered dreams. The haze of their memories knotted itself around me, each thread whispering agonies that tore at my essence. I inhaled sharply, choking on despair, and the air thickened, igniting a flame of madness. In a moment of wild terror, my heart aligned with the rhythm of despair, and that familiar laughter echoed once more, a symphony of centuries, a cacophony that urged me to abandon my humanity, to embrace the madness. And as I teetered dangerously close to that precipice ready to plunge into the depths, I felt a hand, warm and soft, reach for me from the wraith-like mass. "Choose," it implored, the voice entwined with sweetness and longing. "The light promised a different eternity, but we can save you from this shattered realm. Reject us, and live this hell for eternity." I froze. That familiar face, now Clermy's own distorted semblance, smiled back at me, a grotesque reflection that flooded my thoughts with shadows. "What have you done?" I gasped, as the visions of the past enveloped me. In that instant, the boots jolted, they were closing around my ankles with an electrifying grip. They lashed out, crawling toward the wraith's outstretched hand, the shadows swarming around up like angry hornets. Then, as the figures began to howl, contorting into twisted laughter, the very fabric of the cellar shimmered, and reality fractured. With one final desperate cry, I launched myself toward the wraith, but the shadows surged, stretching, pulling, clasping at me until hope twisted and spiraled away. And in the final heartbeat before I vanished into their dark embrace, the last thing I heard was that terrible laughter breaking through the Hesea, resonating echo that promised I was bound to the dance, forever tangled in their unseen web of despair. "Welcome home," they chorused, as the darkness plunged deeper, swallowing me whole, into the vastness of night that eternally awaited the arrival of new souls. The darkness consumed me, swallowing my scream, reshaping my thoughts into a swirling tempest of dread. My world turned to shadow, and I flailed against the unseen forces, trapped in the attic of a long-buried memory. Time stretched and palpated around me, weightless yet heavy, as if a giant hand pressed my existence down into the unyielding earth. "Welcome home," danced around me, an echo of malice laced with an unholy glee. I tried to scream again, but the air had solidified, clogging my throat, suffocating me as it thickened into a tangible miasma. The boots still tortured my legs with every pulse of darkness. They beckoned as if alive, stitching me into the fabric of this dim and grotesque tapestry. I saw flickers just beyond my reach, glimpses of a world both familiar and yet feral, a place where shadows played tricks on the edges of my sanity, where smiles hid horrors and laughter dressed rot as music. I drifted through the haze, a specter among specters, a whisper drowning amid a chorus of wails, searching desperately for an anchor. The ache of loss writhed within me like a serpent, coiling tighter with each passing moment, seeking my surrender. Then, fragmented images poured forth, faces of the haunt, those lost guardians of despair. I stumbled backward, reverberating through the shuddering air. Above me hung the specter of a family gathered around a feeble candle, their faces illuminated but drained of life, eyes wide, mouths frozen in a silent scream, echoing accusations against my memory. A mother, a brother, friends I called my own. Every gaze burrowed under my skin, demanding penance, anchored to the boots that threatened to pull me deeper into their longing. Suddenly, an icy wind nudged its way through the cellar's muck-ridden stones, rippling past me with whispered promises of absolution, even as the ghostly figures lurched closer in the purged shadows. I pressed myself against the wall, trembling, searching for the escape that the darkness denied. Then, like thunder rolling from deep within the earth, a new presence emerged from the depths. It was slow, deliberate, crawling towards me as if to savor the drip of my despair. I could feel it pulsating, a heavy weight that sent tremors through the ground, murmuring truth and lies entwined. The other souls shrank away, parting like waves as this entity rose, a shifting silhouette crowned with hunger and madness, a reverberating heartbeat syncing with my own. "Feed it," the silhouette rasped, voice woven from the dust of graves. "It thirsts for your affliction." As if on cue, The boots jerked violently, dragging me toward the figure. A whirlwind of darkness sprouted between us, whirling like a storm, until shards of bone splintered against the ground, mingling with visions of agony, people clawing at broken hearts, their howls merging with the tainted laughter, stitching the threads of madness into a tapestry of despair. A tear fell unbidden, burning as it slid down my cheek, feeding the shadows that craved emotion. In that moment, the figure leaned closer, its face obscured, yet a twisted grin lingered on the edges, waiting like the coiling tendrils of a tempest. Your pain, it crooned, is our sustenance. Suddenly memory struck my mind like a sledgehammer. The day I chose to betray the very people who loved me, a fleeting decision turned heavy as lead, forging shackles that would never release me. The shadows burgeoned hungrily with clarity, and I gasped as I heard their stories spilling into my ears, each one a reflection of my own disgrace, a testament to sacrifice. Cries that wailed deep within my spirit. Each fragment was a knife, slicing through layers of my guilt. The boots pulsed again, stronger, echoing the heartbeat of the entity looming ever closer, and just as my world shrank to a singular sense of despair, the wraith bent down with claws outstretched, enveloping my fading resistance like the folded pages of a cursed tome. "Join us," it whispered, and as if the air itself obeyed, the shadows howled in unison. Heart racing, I found strength amidst devastation, bolting past the entity, and forcing my way through the swirling mass of despair, adrift in an abyss that clawed mercilessly at my heels. They screamed. Flames of fear ignited within me as the shouts turned into a roar of anguished voices, each trying to drag me back to that abyss, into the heart of despair, where they would weave their tales of torment into my soul. But just as I lunged through the shadowed doorway, I felt a hand curl around my wrist, its grip unyielding. And then, shattering my last thread of hope, the voice echoed one final time, laden with the weight of eternity. "You cannot escape what has been summoned." In a heartbeat, the flourishing darkness surged back like an angry tide, swallowing me once again, pulling me down into the very heart of madness. I gasped, but my breath was an echo buried in despair. Then, as the last vestiges of light faded away, I caught a fleeting glimpse of what awaited me in the void. Severed heads wreathed in blackened vines, eyes bursting with unshed tears, my own reflection wavering above theirs, a terrible testament of the price I might yet pay for trying to run. I was bound to this fate, and as the final whispers of reality faded, the laughter erupted in a joyous cacophony that surged through the air. "Welcome home," they sang again, as the shadows groaned with wicked delight. But then, with one final shudder of agony, the ground beneath me trembled, fissures cracking open, and I felt an undeniable pull toward an abyss deeper than fear itself. A new figure emerging from the folds of fog, its shape more grotesque than all the others. My heart faltered, and I realized in horror, there were worse things lurking beyond the darkness than I ever could have imagined. As the figure grinned with insatiable hunger, its eyes locking onto mine, I understood the true terror of what I had summoned. And that was the moment I screamed. The scream echoed in the suffocating darkness, stretching into an infinity that tasted of metal and decay. It felt as though time itself had fractured, remnants of my voice spiraling out into the void, met only with the mocking laughter of the shadows around me. I twisted, desperate to escape the wicked thing looming closer, the creature whose features warped and reshaped with blasphemous glee, its mouth a cruel crescent spilling shadows of laughter, soundless yet deafening in its malice. The ground beneath me shuddered violently, the ancient wood quaking like a wounded animal. Grit and dust pooled around my knees, but I couldn't afford to kneel. Even as the figure advanced, my spirit recoiled against the horror, anchoring me for a chilling second, allowing clarity amidst the chaos. "This is real," I pleaded with myself. "This is a nightmare." I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing the relentless pull of darkness away, but reality shredded, revealing profound depths of nightmare layered just below the blood-red embers in its gaze. "Why do you tremble?" it whispered, voice sticky with delight, thick like syrup. You called us forth. Do you long to bask in your own affliction? I staggered backward, but the vibrant tendrils of shadow wound around my body with sinister intention, tightening like a vice, spiraling into my very being. No! No! My protests were swallowed whole, muffled beneath the chorus of those I knew, their whispers curling around like thorned vines, each voice scratching at my consciousness. Your sins left us behind, another voice hissed, familiar and distant, tugging at the corners of my mind. Embrace the darkness, and you shall uncover the truth behind your betrayal. I squeezed my eyes tighter, those words, like a malignant truth burrowing deeper, igniting memories better left untouched. With every recollection, every flicker of betrayal, pain grew sharp and bright, cutting through the entanglement of shadow. They had cried out for me. For strength, the weight of their disappointment hung upon my shoulders like a noose, threatening to pull me backward into the annals of despair that birthed this malevolence. Let them fade. The creature cooed, drawing closer, the stench of rot filling the air as its shadowy form morphed and twisted. But no, dear one, none who summon us ever leave unchanged. My heart thundered as I recalled the choices I made, the family gatherings I abandoned for hollow friendships, the sacrifices never returned. With each reflection, each glimmer of past warmth turned cold, the dark form swelled, consuming every inch of the suffocating air. I will not lose myself, I screamed inwardly, an agonizing resistance rising. You have no power over me. But there was something in those savage eyes, a whisper of truth so vile it set my skin to crawl. You are already ours, buried beneath layers of denials and lies. Let the past weave itself back into your soul. In that moment, I felt a sudden surge, a fierce drive igniting my spine, cleaving through the dread. I turned, desperate for an escape, pushing through the unrelenting tendrils, thrashing like a drowning sailor fighting against the tide. But gripping at my ankles were the ghosts of regret, their faces twisted in unfathomable pain, forcing me to remember, to feel. And oh, I gasped no more. The shaking of my voice betrayed me, the fervor fading as the darkness wouldn't relent. Release me. Yet with every plea, the figure moved closer. Its visage was grotesque, melding into nightmarish shapes, unrecognizable eyes flickering with dark intention, bright against the backdrop of despair, eyes that demanded retribution. I felt the boots begin to pull me, yearning to re-enter the depths of anguish that they had promised to shelter me from all along. My chest ached and throbbed, as if it strained to contain all the horror echoing around me. With a primal roar, I wrenched myself free, staggering into the heart of the storm. Shapes flickered around me, voices swelling to a cacophony that pierced my mind with a righteous fury. Join us. Share your truth. Shrieked the shadows, the pressure mounting until I felt the very fabric of reality strain. Then, from the depths of the obscurity, a figure emerged, a likeness of myself, tantalizingly beautiful yet grotesque, clad in tattered remnants of glittering costume fragments that echoed my past. Its features blended mine with others, the laughter morphing into cries of desolation. You can't flee from yourself, it taunted, eyes glistening like obsidian shards. You will wear our scars, eternally marked by the truths you shunned. I gasped, throat constricting, wrestling with the urge to bolt while struggling to remain anchored in sanity. The pressure of despair curled around my mind, fusing anguish into a potent beast, a spirit I knew I couldn't face alone. In that instant of horrific recognition, I understood the depths of my confinement, and just as my last reserve of determination threatened to fray, the unforgiving shadows erupted around me, swirling into a tempest of frantic energy. But as I teetered on the precipice of surrender and resistance, I heard a new voice cut through the din, a whisper, soft yet commanding. It won't let you go. Not now. The last vestiges of my strength faltered as I turned in horror, seeing what loomed beyond the shadows, an enormous door with warped, splintered wood, glimmering faintly with the blood of the forgotten, marking a threshold I had never dared approach. and as the doors creaked slowly open, inviting me into the unknown depths, a pulse surged with insatiable urgency, dragging me toward the threshold, where shadows pivoted to clamor madness unspeakable. My heart seized. The true nightmare had only just begun. The door yawned wider, drawing me into its maw, each creak echoing with the unmistakable cadence of despair. A cold draft slithered forth, a silent siren beckoning me closer to the waiting darkness. I teetered on the edge of dread, caught between the horror of what lay beyond and the torment already embroiling my reality. With the shadows coiling around my legs, each tendril a painful reminder of the weight of my past, I found myself unable to resist the pull. "Don't go!" a voice pleaded, muffled and distorted. I spun back, and my heart sank as I saw an ethereal face staring at me through the swirling dark, a doppelganger of the friend I had abandoned, mouth stretched into a silent scream, eyes wide with terror. "No! It's a trap!" I wanted to shout, but the words choked in my throat, tangled in the web of regret swirling at my feet. I turned quickly back to the door, breath quickening, as icy fingers of anxiety clawed at my spine. "I won't let you take me," I murmured defiantly, though the conviction wavered like a candle flickering in a storm. I stepped through the threshold. The air roasted with a pungent mix of dust and despair. A sepulchral silence swallowed me up, the once piercing whispers fading as they wrapped around my senses. Inside, shadows elongated, forming grotesque shapes that danced on the walls. It felt like I had stepped into a sepulchre, each movement resonating with an ancient and unspeakable sorrow that whispered of lost souls entwined in agony. I was enveloped in darkness, a darkness so absolute it devoured the flickering essence of my thoughts. The air thickened, emotions intertwined with the shadow, shape-shifting into something indefinable. My heart raced, and with it, the echoes of familiar betrayals drummed against my temples. Faces slipped past my mind's eye, friends, family, each one a token of culpability, a stone tethered to my heart. They stood with hollow hearts yearning for a glimpse of the real me, the layers I had wrapped around myself to shield from their gaze. Then, a pinprick of light emerged, a mere sliver, flickering amid the oppressive gloom. Instinctively, I reached for it, fingers stretching toward hope. As I drew closer, I recognized a pockmarked mirror standing against the far wall, reflecting the deeper layers of my existence. It illustrated a world beyond the horror, but it resonated with a sense of foreboding. Something lurking behind me shifted, coiling in anticipation. My reflection shifted, distorting away from my own familiar visage. With a gasp, I saw the girl I had been, the carefree dreamer, unblemished by guilt, morph into a caricature of despair. Shadows ignited in her eyes, consuming the innocence I had lost. She grinned widely, a macabre smile fractured by the torment of what I had become. "Look away, and you shall lose yourself," she sang, each note slicing through the air like glass. I pressed my palm against the mirror, warily stepping closer. The warm flicker of hope morphed into searing flames as another familiar face flickered past me, mother, her eyes pleading from within the mirror's depths, entreating me for my forgiveness. I recoiled. "No! How can you be here?" My voice wobbled, reverberating off the warped wall. Shadows encased, consumed by the desperation that hung heavy in the air. "Face the truth, face your sins." The faceless forms loomed closer, their cries echoing against the aged wood. "You summoned us. You've danced in darkness for far too long." My breath quickened, panic bubbling at the edges of my sanity. Every voice layered upon another, all intertwining like a human tapestry woven with betrayal. I felt the ground begin to tremble beneath me, each pulse resonating through my being. They reached out toward the mirror, mouths forming silent screams, pulling at the seams of my mind. I knew there was a reckoning on the horizon, a truth too terrible to confront. Then silence swelled, an ominous lull that wrapped itself around me. My reflection began to smile wider, wider, until the expression was all teeth and no warmth. "Join us. Embrace the darkness, and we will guide you. As if on cue, the mirror shattered into 1,000 glimmering shards, each fragment whispering fragments of my life, points of joy, lament, and choices made. They spiraled around me, slicing at my skin, drawing blood, me own essence spilling into the void, and with each drop, the shadows grew thicker. Suddenly, the myriad voices froze, as if halting in anticipation. I could feel eyes pressing against my back, pulling me toward the wreckage of the mirror, toward the truth I was meant to unearth. The dark weight twisted tighter around my throat, as if the shadows were not merely beings of despair, but fragments of myself forgotten in the recesses of my choice. I gasped for air, suddenly aware of the unsettling silence beneath the chaos. Behind me, a low chuckle reverberated, the chilling familiar sound curling up my spine, a reminder that I was never truly alone in this madness. And then, the world exploded into chaos as the shadows lunged, a monstrous wave of grief and fury crashing down upon me, tearing through the thin shred of reality that had tethered me to sanity. "Don't fight it!" they roared in unison. "You belong to the darkness now!" And as I prepared to plunge into that unfathomable chasm of shadows, I caught a fleeting glimpse of something terrible emerging from the remnants of the broken Marora, shape growing larger, its eyes gleaming with an ancient hunger, opening a portal of nightmares beyond my understanding. And in one horrifying heartbeat, I realized I was about to enter a darkness that would demand a sacrifice I could never comprehend. It was time to face the depths of my unraveling soul. The shrieks of the shadows enveloped me, echoing in a cacophony of grief that twisted through my mind like a serpent of despair. I was caught between two worlds, of fragments of my past swirling around me, and the growing monstrosity that breathed heavily from within the shattered remains of the mirror. Each piece glinted maliciously, a portal to the memories I tried so desperately to evade. With a surge of adrenaline, I stumbled backward, clawing at the air as the shadows lunged for me. They swirled like a tempest, alive, hungry, ravenous for more than just my essence, craving my deepest fears and isolations. I was in the eye of their storm, ensnared in a dance of madness and regret that threatened to pull me under. I could see faces emerging from the gloom, familiar yet distorted. A sickening realization gripped my heart. I was witnessing the manifestation of my guilt, twisted into haunting specters. Each one seemed to wave their arms in unison, calling me closer, and I felt the weight of their sorrow pressing against my chest. They knew my secrets. Each whisper they uttered was a reminder of everything I had hoped to escape. "Come to us," one voice chimed, rich with mockery, "join the forgotten. You are one of us now." I shook my head violently, tears streaming down my cheeks, blurring the lines of reality and the abyss. But it was relentless, the tendrils of darkness curling around my limbs, anchoring me in place. I was anchored to my failures, and the fear that had once felt distant now slipped like a noose around my throat. My mind raced back to my last moments of bravery when I had almost decided to confront the truth, but now it eluded me like a wisp of smoke, wrapping me in despair. The images that ignited my guilt began to flicker violently, dragging my attention to their hands clawing at the space between us. Suddenly, I felt the grotesque presence of something looming behind me, a force so menacing I could almost taste the rancid air that radiated from it. The shadows parted like a curtain, unveiling a creature born from Nightmares, a vast, towering figure swathed in darkness, every feature obscured except for its eyes, two orbs glowing like dying embers, burning with an insatiable hunger. "Your sacrifice is close," it hissed, its voice swirling within my mind, slipping into every shadow, every regret, every broken promise I had ever made. My breath quickened, and in that fleeting moment when it leaned closer, I recognized the awful familiarity of its silhouette, a twisted reflection of my own. "Join us," it intoned, "and you shall never know loneliness again." Panic surged through me, igniting a fire in my chest that licked at the edges of my soul. I turned back toward the jagged remnants of the mirror, my sanity teetering. I had to make a choice, to succumb to the darkness that now enveloped me, or to fight against the very core of my being. My heart thudded, a desperate drum of defiance amidst the ever-present chorus of shadows begging me to yield. Driven by instinct alone, I reached for what remained of my hope. I recalled the essence of the girl I had once been, the dreamer whose spirit had long since withered under the weight of my choices. Grappling with the rift in my soul, I screamed, "I will not join you." The shadows recoiled momentarily, a shockwave of silence washing over them as if they weren't accustomed to defiance. But the sinister figure did not waver. It opened its mouth wider, a gaping void threatening to swallow my very essence whole. "You will join us, willingly or not," it rasped, and at that moment, I felt the ground beneath me shift, splintering apart. Like the shattering mirror, reality itself unfurled into chaos. The walls of the room cracked, revealing a vast chasm beneath, a gnashing maw of darkness reaching for me. The shadows clawed at my legs, dragging me back toward the gaping abyss, and with all my strength, I fought against the pull. Then, somehow, I remembered the past, the good memories holding the weight of my heart, wrapping their arms around my spirit. Each one brought me closer to the truth. Understanding that I could not change what had happened, but I could still choose who I wished to be. And in the dim glow of the desolation, I let out a primal roar, channeling the courage that had long been buried beneath layers of shame and guilt. The air crackled with energy, sending shockwaves through the realm around me. I could feel the shadows faltering, the hunger of the creature wavering at the raw power of my defiance. Yet, just as the tide seemed to shift, the floor beneath me gave way. I staggered, losing my footing, and as I plunged into the black void below, my scream echoed into a silence that devoured all hope. I fell deeper, and as the world around me dissolved into an unfathomable darkness, a haunting voice whispered from the chasm, "You cannot escape what you've invited. Your choice has only begun." And just before I vanished into the abyss, I caught another glimmer of light, a feral, blinding light. Something was beneath me, something that grasped for me, urging me toward a new horror yet to be revealed. I plummeted through the darkness, the chilling remnants of the world growing distant above me. The air became viscous, wrapping around me like a surreal shroud, each breath a struggle against the weight of despair. I felt fragmented, caught in a limbo where heartbreak and dread danced hand in hand. Laughing at the folly of my fight against the shadows. As I descended deeper, the embodiment of my fears slipped away, but an even more acute terror began to set in. Echoes reverberated off unseen walls, a chorus of whispers intermingled with the wails of the damned. The cries twisted and contorted, haunting melodies that played on the strings of long-forgotten memories, threatening to shatter what little remained of my sanity. Abruptly, I hit a surface that felt shockingly solid amidst the void, sprawling out atop a cold, hard ground that emanated a palpable malice. I lay on my back, breathless and disoriented, the shadows swirling like a storm above. Rising cautiously, my heart raced as I surveyed the eerie surroundings. Against the oppressive darkness, shapes began to resolve, grotesque figures draped in tattered remnants of what might have once been clothing, but now they were mere suits of pockmarked flesh. They stood motionless, gaunt faces veiled by a mask of despair, all staring at me with hollow eyes that whispered their regrets. "The stains of your reality have forged our existence," one of them croaked, voice rasping like a worn-out record. "Step into the madness you have conjured." My stomach churned as I fought the urge to scream. I recognized this place. The cavern of shadows was a reflection of my guilt, a grotesque hall of mirrors reflecting my innermost fears. Each echo from the shadows reached for me, beckoning me to embrace their torment instead of fleeing. I turned to run, only to find my path blocked by a massive figure, obscured in the remnants of shadows whispering dreadful secrets. "You have arrived at last," it intoned, voice thick with dark amusement. The contours of its body shimmered, revealing fleeting glimpses of the girl's face I once knew, twisted in eternal sorrow. "You are home now, drawn back to where you truly belong." The despairing faces of the ghostly figures began to merge with the shadow, transforming with bone-chilling clarity into the faces of my dearest friends and family. Each one bore the emotional weight of a choice I had failed to make, a desperate wish I had ignored. I could see their open mouths moving, but all that emerged were sounds muffled by loss. Their expressions were agony incarnate, pleading for relief, for the closure that I had kept just out of reach. No. I screamed, trembling. "You're not real. This is all a trick." Yet even as I shouted, shards of doubt pierced my heart. I once succumbed to this. Driven by a sudden surge of defiance, I plunged forward, trying to break through the tapestry of souls clinging desperately to my every movement. My hands grasped at the shadows, tearing through the confines of their grasp, but the deeper I pushed, the more they clawed back. They were hungry, needing my fear, feeding off my regret like a ravenous beast. Then, amidst the struggle, a sudden pull seized my heart, a sharp pain that felt familiar. I turned, paralyzed by the sight of a pair of boots glimmering in the darkness. They were slick with a dark sheen, entangled in the weight of the souls around them. The boots beckoned me closer, an enticement wrapped in malevolence. Before I could comprehend the danger, they jutted forward, dragging me into their grasp. I stumbled toward them, losing my balance once more. As I glanced down, the ground rippled, shifting into a mirage of a long-lost memory, the backyard where we once played, laughter echoing in the air, the sunlight bathing us in its warmth. But that warmth twisted into an unsettling chill as the boots transformed, and a pulse of darkness surged through them, reclaiming the joyous scene and twisting it into something wicked. An overwhelming force engulfed my senses, overwhelming me as it pulled me deeper into the horror. I realized with dread that I was once again trapped by the very memories I had tried to escape. The faces of my friends and family morphed into expectant masks of darkness, their wails now layered with anticipation. The boots echoed the unspeakable. Each step I took was a step into their despair, a pact written in agony. The figure loomed larger, its eyes burning with the inferno of insatiable hunger, urging me to yield. The haunting voices whispered, "Wear them, claim your place among us, and the madness will become your ally." And as I felt the ground tremble beneath me, the abyss threatening to swallow me whole yet again, the world exploded. Lightning crackled from above, tearing through the darkness as shadows writhed in ecstasy, the boots pulling tighter around my legs. A voice thundered through the chaos, "Embrace your past, and you shall understand the true madness that awaits." But something flickered in the depths of the shadow. A glimmer of hope, or yet another trap. I couldn't tell. All I knew was that I was at a precipice. Before me lay madness incarnate, and stepping forward could end everything I ever cared for. I had one chance to escape, for the beckoning darkness craved my surrender, and with a single step I would condemn my very soul. Yet, the pull of the boots became too strong, dragging me back toward the phantoms bathed in sorrow, and my last scream for freedom echoed back at me as I teetered on the edge, poised to either lose myself completely or reclaim the last fragments of my being. The darkness enveloped me, its tendrils pulling tighter as the echoes of despair birthed from within its impenetrable folds. I gasped, my heart pounding against my chest as memories surged forward, each one a dagger twisting deeper into my soul. Those faces, those cruel reminders of betrayal and choice, closed in around me, a haunting gallery of my past, demanding attention. With every heartbeat, the weight of their silent screams filled the air, crafting a noose that tightened inexorably around my throat. I was trapped in a mausoleum of my regrets, and the boots at my feet were binding me to this grotesque realm. In that paralyzing moment, a chilling truth surged through my awareness. I was not just a prisoner of the shadows. I had become the very essence of their despair. Those boots, those cursed relics I had thought were a mere manifestation of the supernatural, were woven from the fabric of all that I had lost and forsaken. They demanded a surrender, an acknowledgement of the darkness inside me that had birthed them in the first place. No! I screamed, flailing against the shadows as I clawed back toward the flickering light I thought I glimpsed at the edges of despair, bright and beckoning, promising a way out. With desperation, I fought, feeling the shadows lashing at my ankles, their voices rising in a symphony of tortured wails. You long for escape, they hissed, intertwining with the echoes of my own thoughts. But you have invited us into your heart. As I stumbled backward, the air shifted. The weight of my choice shifted with it, and I could see the doppelgangers of my friends and me, mother, my brother, those I loved, pleading with me. Their eyes glimmered with sorrow, reflecting the fractured shards of my actions. I was collapsing in on myself, a heavy confluence of guilt and yearning, spiraling into an inescapable cyclone. Then the figure appeared. At first, indistinct, it transformed as if the shadows poured themselves into a new vessel. A grotesque distortion of my own visage took shape, eyes gleaming like obsidian, glinting with malicious glee. It grinned at me, mocking and familiar, a sinister mirror reflecting every choice, every despair, every ounce of pain I had buried deep within. See what you become, it crooned, delighting in my torment. You can't hide from yourself. The realization struck like ice through my veins. I was never meant to escape this madness. I had opened the door, and within the chaos of consciousness, I was fated to dwell. I had thought that the act of summoning the boots had been an innocent misstep, a trivial dalliance in the grand theater of horrors, a peek behind the curtain that should have remained shut. But I had invited the depths of my own sorrow to manifest. The curse was not only in the boots, it was in me. You're one of us, my dear, the creature said, its voice a silky whisper echoing the cacophony of the shadows around us. Join the dance of despair. It seeks no end. No. I refused, my heart screaming for rebellion. But the shadowy specters pressed closer, their outstretched limbs weaving together, blending into a mass of spectral lament. Then the world shifted again, blurring and warping as the beings surged, pouring forth their grief, wrapping it around me like chains forged from my own failures. The ground trembled dangerously beneath the weight of their wailing, a torment so raw it threatened to consume me. You think the light can save you? The entity laughed. Do you think you can still escape the darkness you invited? And suddenly I understood. I had participated in this chaos. Each step I had taken since acquiring the boots had fed into their enchantment, their hunger for more victims. My past haunted me. The choices I had made clouded my present, feeding the abyss that craved not only to consume me, but to revel in the knowledge that I was willingly conjuring this suffering. With one final surge of will, I turned. I will not yield, I shouted against the void, directing every ounce of anguish toward that malignant reflection of myself. I reject the darkness, and I will not let it live. Within me, an electric pulse erupted within me, and I felt the very essence of my being resonate against the onslaught of shadows. A blinding light pierced through the darkness that originated from inside. I had to face the memories, acknowledge the pain, and yet I had to reject the festering intimacy of sorrow that threatened to devour who I was. The vacuum of the void recoiled as I grasped the glimmering light within me, love for those I had lost, for my family, for the joy buried under the wreckage of past choices. With a guttural roar, I ripped through the grasp of the shadows, feeling the boots squeal against the weight of my defiance. No! The shadows shrieked, their cries a cacophony of betrayal and anguish. You cannot cast us away, but I could. I propelled myself forward, launching into the blinding light that promised destruction of the darkness I had invited. It enveloped me, consuming everything that had tethered me to sorrow. The shadows lurched, twisting and writhing in frustration as the warmth rolled over them. In that beautiful brightness, the chains fell from my heart, refracting into a kaleidoscope of hope and light. And just before I slipped completely into its embrace, the last whisper, the chilling reminder of what I might once have claimed, echoed hauntingly in my mind. You will always wear them, even if you escape. And then, silence. The world dissolved into brilliance, and the last thing I felt was the warmth of love filling the cracks in my soul. But beneath that safety, a shadow lingered, a gnawing sense of despair that whispered persistently, echoing endlessly in the recesses of my mind. You can never truly escape the darkness you have worn.